I will start by just congratulating Coach Gundy and his team and his staff. I thought it was just a tremendous, again, example of a team having the ability to stay locked in, through the noise. It's hard. We talked about it before. Like when things don't go well, the reaction extremes can sometimes be hard for young folks, and that that his staff and him as the leader was able to keep that thing together and figure out a way to finish with a phenomenal season. Hats off to him. Another 10-win year. Was that 18 straight or something like that, or 18 straight bowl games, and several 10-win seasons. And I don't know all the history. Obviously, they've been good the whole time I've been here, but I've heard, talking to enough people, that it hasn't always been this way. And I think that's part of it also, kind of a victim of his own success. So he's obviously a phenomenal coach, a tremendous leader, and really happy for him. Even happier that you're starting to hear that some of his really, really key players will be returning next year. So makes everybody excited. So look forward to seeing how they build off this momentum they've gotten. And, recruiting's a big deal. I know that's going on now, and early signing period's passed, but they got another one, I think, in February. So just excited. As far as us, I'm glad to be back. We had 5 days away from these guys. Gave my staff and I some time to digest the first 11 games in terms of where we feel we are, how we've improved, what are things we still need to get better at. The best part of it, from my perspective, and we've talked about this to our team, is that we feel like a lot of the things that we struggle with are fixable. And obviously that's important because this isn't the NBA where there's a trade deadline sometime in the next month or so where you can go get a different body. We feel like we like the pieces. Our margin for error is clearly not as great as maybe some other teams out there with as many young guys as we're playing, but I think we can get them to understand a sense of urgency over the next week before we start conference play. But we got 2 big games before that, and South Carolina State will give us a test in some different ways than we've seen, especially in the last couple of weeks. Dealing with so many really good shooting teams, they're not that. They attack in a different way, and I haven't really watched Chicago State other than knowing that they won at Northwestern early in the month. So obviously they're a capable team as well. So we got 2 tough games before conference play, and probably need to play a couple games before we get in the Big 12 play.
What are some things that you want to see from your group before Big 12 play starts in about a week?
Yeah, I mean, a couple things that just jump off the page is, I think the intentionality we've had about shooting and ball handling has been, I don't want to say we got it figured out, because obviously you can go into a shooting slump pretty quickly, and we obviously didn't start off the year shooting the ball great, and so there was some question as to whether we actually did have it fixed. So we need to keep building there, keep being a team that gets great shots. Vaughn's going to continue to be our primary playmaker. We need to build off what we've seen from Bryce Thompson the last week. He seems to be getting back into a rhythm, comfortable. We need him. We need him and Javon to really kind of drive the train for us on the offensive end. And we got to continue to develop Brandon Garrison. We like the progress he's made in the first month of the season. But we also need to probably get a little bit more teeth to our defense in terms of, and I've said this team is different, but we went from a team that could shut you out to a team that really kind of bends, don't break. But we got to be able to get probably force some more turnovers. We don't force a ton of turnovers, so we don't get as many easy baskets, ones that guys that need in transition are missing out on. So Q, I think he's averaging like 7 a game. We probably need to get him 10 to 12, 13, and most of those will come from getting to the offensive glass, which we haven't done a great job of, and creating some more off of our defense.
How do you improve upon offensive rebounding? What does that look like from a practice standpoint?
Yeah, it's just, rebounding on both ends is really a product of intent, commitment. There's not really I guess there is a strategy. I don't want to totally blow it off as but more of it, you've been around basketball, it's more pursuit, like having a mentality. I've seen 6'4" guys who are phenomenal rebounders. I've seen 7-foot guys who are really good rebounders. And a lot of it is the feel for where the ball bounces, having an idea of anticipating when the shot's going up, where to go. Most shots that are shot from the right side and certainly down, bounce off to left side. So just seeing those over and over again and being able to identify guys who can be good doing that. We think Q obviously is a guy who's really good. Daly can be better there. Garrison can be better there, although in some of his minutes so far he's been good, not great. But I think we can get more from Bryce Thompson, maybe even Jamarian Keller, depending on who he's in with. The other guy maybe getting back in defensive balance. But it's really just identifying the guys who can be good at it and then putting them out there with some other guys who maybe can give us something different.
For some of those young guys, do you think maybe even they're thinking about whatever's happening next instead of pursuing offensive rebounding?
Not on offense.
Okay.
I mean, usually on defense, that's the case. So blocking out and defense rebounding, that's a lot of time with young guys. On offense, most of the time it's either they didn't get the shot or they're assuming the shot's going up and you know, they don't have the mindset yet. And we haven't done a good enough job of just drilling that into their heads that your responsibility as a guy who doesn't shoot is not to assume it's going to go in. Like I get to do that, but I can't go get the rebound. I want Connor and Jarius to make every three they shoot. But if Eric or Q or BG are on the court at the time, we can't be given the three symbol and try back. Like, you got a job to do at that moment, and we can celebrate the next break. So just reps and drilling it in practice, and then having a consequence when it doesn't happen.
Defensively, you mentioned this team is getting better. How what does that look like? Because you mentioned going from last year, you've had a lot of defenders to this year. It hasn't been a big emphasis for these guys coming in. How does that? Is that will? Is that technique? What kind of goes into that?
I'd say it's a couple things. First is just the concepts themselves, right? First, any concepts for some of them, right? Anything on defense that's like, I say it jokingly, like when your man doesn't have the ball and we don't have it, you're still on defense. Like, some of the guys don't think they're on defense if they're not guarding the guy that has the ball. It's like he's on defense and I'll be on defense when my man gets it. That's not really how it works. But for many of the freshmen, they haven't had to be held accountable to it. I'm sure all their coaches talked about defense. I mean, come on, not getting on any of these guys, high school coaches, they were good coaches, but it's also a thing when a guy gets 40 for you, you may kind of look the other way when he isn't in a great position on defense or doesn't drop down and block out because you need his gravity on the other end. And so once that happens, it's just getting comfortable with, because basketball is not that complicated. We see a lot of the same stuff. So then being able to anticipate a little bit what's coming and then reacting to what actually happens. So we may have a concept where if the ball gets driven baseline, the guys will come over and one rotates down. Well, if that guy's late, he gets all the way down there. Maybe you're not rotating where you normally do, but you got to find the ball. And then, over time, as they get continuity with each other, which is really what we had more so than anything the last few years. We had so many guys who had played in the system and knew it without us really having to work on it a ton. And we had defensive-minded guys like Musa and Avery who really took pride in that part of the game. We'll develop those guys. Keller's got a great body and ability to become a really good defender. Connor, because of his length and intelligence, can become a really good defender. Eric Daly can be a better defender than he even gives himself credit for. So it's just a matter of now getting them enough reps. And the beauty of this time of year is we're not restricted by hours. We can spend a lot of time really watching film and breaking those things down.
Eric, he's a guy who came in with seemingly really high expectations for himself. How have you kind of seen his first couple of months as a college player?
Yeah, it's interesting. I meet with our guys 2, 3, sometimes 4 times throughout the year, just at different places. I always want these guys to kind of know where they stand, so they can be comfortable with what we're asking them to do and improve the things that they're not necessarily doing well. And you tend to, when a guy's expected to play well, kind of disregard that he's actually doing the same thing as the other guys you don't expect to do well for the first time, just like they are. And you got to try to rein those expectations again and give them a little bit of grace. But I think overall, I'm very pleased with what him and Brandon and really Keller, who are pretty primary freshmen who played the most, have done for us through 11 games, some of them more than others. Keller's obviously missed the first 4. Just because I've seen them embrace the coaching, embrace the challenges of getting better, embrace their teammates getting on them, which is new for all those guys. They were the leader. I went and watched Jamarian Keller run a high school practice and at 6:30 in the morning one morning, so now listening to Bryce Thompson, listening to Javon Smalls, you can kind of have some resistance to that early if you don't have the right level of humility. But they're all coachable. pretty disciplined guys, and for Eric in particular, I've challenged him to do even more, and not necessarily scoring, but being more impactful, rebounding better, having more of a voice out there. I mean, you guys playing 25 minutes a game as a freshman. That means we think he's good enough to help us. So don't think like a freshman. Put yourself out there, but then be open to the criticism when you do make the mistakes.
South Carolina State and Chicago State, not regular non-con opponents that you guys had. How have these games kind of come to be on your schedule?
Well, part of it is just the timing of conference play is a little bit off this year. I don't know if we've ever had 2 games between the Christmas break ending and conference play. And I mean, a couple of these years we played a conference game first at this point. So just trying to find a balance of what our team needs, what we haven't seen. And so these were the last 2 games that we actually filled our schedule with. And so kind of looking at the early part of the schedule and seeing, all right, what haven't we seen? And what we're going to see, I don't know if you know Eric Martin, who played for Hugs at Cincinnati and then was an assistant for him at West Virginia, is their coach. Their style of play similar to what we're going to see at West Virginia. We hadn't seen a team that presses, that's going to be super aggressive, trying to play for steals, going to drive you more than they're going to try to beat you from the three-point line. And Chicago State's got probably 2 of the best ISO players in terms of the few times that I've watched them play that we've guarded this year. And so different in terms of systems and styles that'll be good for us going into conference play, because got a pretty good feel for most of the conference teams and how they like to play. But surely there's going to be some things that maybe we see for the first time, maybe with the new teams that we haven't played yet.
I imagine you guys have practiced or something yet, but have you felt the guys have responded to the break that they've had?
They've been good. I mean, we told them kind of what to expect before they left, and we wanted them to truly get away and kind of disconnect. Certainly from a mental standpoint, it's been a grind for a lot of these guys when you add the fact that we went on a summer trip. So since June, been going at it, and this was the first time in a while that they've been able to have 3 or 4 days of not hearing my voice. So I wanted them to enjoy that, but I also told them when we get back, it's going to be go time, because we're approaching this next week as if it is conference play. It's not necessarily going to show up in the standings that way, but the way we prepare, you're probably going to start seeing us kind of shrink down the rotation a little bit. So we're approaching this like we're getting ready for conference play, and the guys have responded in kind.
You mentioned cutting the rotation a little bit, and I asked you this, I think, a couple weeks ago, but how do you kind of tell those younger guys who maybe have never sat on the bench before that they're going to be there a little bit more than they have been?
I've always operated from a place of just transparency, even with those guys. When we talk about it in the recruiting process, I don't want them to always like what I hear, because that's not my job. My job is to be honest with them, tell them where they stand, and tell them what the opportunities are. So we're probably not playing 12 guys in conference games, realistically. We're probably playing 7, 8, maybe 9, depending on foul trouble situation of the game. And so those guys that are maybe just on the outside have to be prepared when their time comes. And the guys that are on the inside that may be just on the other side of the line, 6, 7, 8, right? They can't get comfortable because the game is fluid. And we don't get to lose because we're committed to you playing, right? You got to play well in your opportunity, and then when you aren't in the role, you got to be ready for, not necessarily that you're wishing for somebody to get hurt or sick or not play well, but you stand sharp in your scouting report studying, you stand sharp on your skill work before and after practice, and you stand ready to do what it is that we need to do if you have to go into the game. So they're not comfortable conversations, but they're necessary, and it's part of being a head coach.
Isaiah's obviously a guy with a ridiculous ceiling, but he hasn't gotten to play a ton because of his injuries. How do you kind of handle him over these next couple of games heading into Big 12?
Yeah, he's probably on the outside, in all honesty. I mean, just for what, multiple reasons, but it's time to kind of go with the guys that we know kind of where we are with. And that doesn't mean he won't play, but his opportunities won't be as much in these next, well, certainly first couple of Big 12 games as we prepare. We'll see how he handles it. You never know until a kid has to go through that. But I certainly hope he's got the maturity to understand that it's not necessarily anybody's fault. It's just, you can't realistically play 12 guys and have any kind of real flow in the game that has as much intensity as we're going to play in the next few weeks.